Faculty, for the most part, are unfamiliar with computers, and a great many of them are just plain scared of them.
They do less dog work, if you will, by hand, and now do more thinking.
Those who are involved with computers tend to think that most human problems can be reduced to a set of numbers.
It's a very dangerous attitude. It can't help but destroy our culture if it ever becomes truly victorious.
It won't change thinking patterns. It'll just give us more information with which to make decisions.
So should we feel guilty about using AI? And this is something that I think, well, maybe a lot of people battle with. I know in the past I had thought this, but I've come to terms with that now. I say no. I don't feel guilty using it. And let's say as long as we're using it in a positive way. And I just want to talk a little bit about that. And I wasn't gonna make this video, but it kind of seemed almost serendipitous to do so. As you know, today I came across a couple of different views on the negative impacts or the perceived negative impacts on AI. And I see these all the time, but today just kind of really resonated and made me want to talk about this a little bit. And the main point was, some of the common, I guess, misconceptions or views around AI and impacts, etc. And I came across a particular idea that I've heard a lot and seen a lot, but it really kind of got me thinking a little bit more. Let me go explore that. I knew my understanding and my view of it already, but I wanted to explore that a little bit more. And I was doing that on the train home today. And then just as I was doing that, I got a message from one of my friends in Germany who stumbled across my video from a couple of months ago. And it was about AI. And Connor, legend, thanks for that. And it was so random and out of nowhere. And it was right in the middle of while I was researching this other part around AI usage and perceived negativity as well. But what really resonated with me was kind of the nuance in his perspective of this. And I really, really liked that. And at the same time, it got me thinking a little bit more that maybe I'm on this camp of, being optimistic around the use cases for AI and how we can leverage AI. That, maybe it's hard to talk about this kind of stuff because not everybody feels kind of the same, and there's quite a negative connotation when talking about generative AI and things like that. And then it got me thinking, and I was like, well, I have my own answers to how I feel about a lot of these perceived negative views on it, and I am okay with the way that I believe in. I have my own perspective, and maybe it's worth sharing that perspective. It was what my train of thought was. And then I went through the process and I was like, what's the point? What's the point of, I guess, having to explain yourself if it's always going to be faced with such negative, I guess, perception? And I think from a lot of the things you see online and you see on the internet and you see on TV, there is such a blanket negativity from what it seems like. And, I can understand that a little bit. But I think ultimately it comes down to a bit of a lack of understanding of the technology, probably a bit of fear and just general, potentially pessimism on some of this. I think it can't be helped as well. It is what it is. We've seen these kind of technological advancements over the times. But then I thought, maybe I can have my own views and my own opinions, and other people would want to understand that as well, because they might think they're similar and they might feel guilty about some of this stuff, but they don't know how to explain it. And then I thought, well, why do I have to keep explaining myself? But let me share my thoughts on some of this stuff. But it got me thinking around, where does all this negativity kind of come from? And why is it such a perception? Maybe it's just my own perception, my own algorithm that's giving me all the negativity, but it just seems like I see it everywhere. And there's always some sort of narrative around it. So I went through a bit of a rabbit hole, talking to Gemini about some of this, but it came from a thought, this is just my own trained thoughts, was around Well, we don't see AI, and the way that I use Gemini is like a search engine, right? You can ask a question, you can query it, you can get access to the resource where you can get it from. And I kind of liken to it the example of the Google search too. A Google search, you search for something, some keywords, and the black box algorithm that was the Google indexing of the internet gives you some results, which you didn't know why you got those results. It was just you got those results. And then you had to go through all the websites. You then have to find what you're looking for, do the analysis, and then try to get the information you're trying to get, or find new information. Now, that where I see AI and the tools using as a bit of a search engine, it shifts the thinking from having to find all the information and being able to analyze it. And I've been thinking a lot about that around, well, the same argument was probably had when Google search came out in the first place. We would have suggested, oh, but it's too easy just to Google search. You just search for a thing and all the answers will pop up for you and you don't even need to click on them. You just, you can only read the one page. And the books, the people in the book camp at the time would have said that. It would have said it's making us get dumber because we're using Google search. We should be using books and using the Dewey system in the library to make sure we don't get any dumber. And I think the same thing about the AI as well. If you're using it as a tool for finding information, helping question, and then you can provide your own analysis and thought process on it, it's helping. It's a tool to help you as a search engine of finding information. And I was doing some research as well, and I found this is a common pattern in history as well, that as a new technology or new thinking comes out, there's always the people in the camp of, oh, this isn't good, this isn't good. I found one dating back to Socrates back in the old days, and he was talking about, oh, you shouldn't write down on paper because it makes you not have to think or remember. It loses your critical thinking and remembering if you have to write it down. And I think it's the same logic that we applies. I had some good examples here. It was in the 15th century. They were talking about printing presses and not having to copy manuscripts. We've got the library to the Google debates as well, and a similar one I think is coming with this shift to generative AI as well, and using it as a search tool. I can understand on some of the the negative connotations of some of the art and things like that, but I don't think we should have a blanket kind of negative view on these types of technology. I think we shouldn't feel guilty. I think we should be leveraging it a lot more. And I guess this is a point in time. It's going to evolve. I think people are going to get on board at some point. They're going to have to. It's not going anywhere. The kids are going to be growing up with this type of thing. But I think there's a little bit of irony in the notion that using generative AI reduces your critical thinking, or it makes you not as smart. It makes you dumber. These types of things, is because I actually think the absolute opposite. In that it gives you access to challenge your own thinking at every single point. I think there's an irony on here that a lot of the information that a lot of people get is from your mass media channels, from your mass algorithm channels, and it's kind of just accepted because you read it and you accept it. But at what point does a human actually look at something on the internet and say, hey, okay, maybe there's something I don't know about this, or maybe it's something I need to learn more. Let me just, do a bit of research here. Now you don't need to do like a Google search and try and find all of the information yourself. You can plug it into a Gen AI tool. If you're coming in with an open mind, it's going to give you an open-minded response. You can even do deep research and get links to websites and research papers, etc., so you can back yourself up. I think using it as a tool like that is only going to make us smarter. I don't think it's going to make us dumber. I think it's going to allow us to challenge our own thinking quicker. We can evolve quicker. We can analyze more and quicker and share ideas and engage quicker. So yeah, I think that it's almost disingenuous to say that it's going to lose our sense of critical thinking. I think it's like any tool that humans have invented or created over the history of time. You know, people are going to be on the bandwagon of this is going to be so negative on society, blah, blah, blah. But if the tool is used correctly, I think it has a mass positive impact on some of the things that we can see. And I think we get too caught up in what the negative is out of fear, out of whatever, that I think that, you know, it needs to be talked about more and understood more instead of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think as well, just there's a kind of another little point that I had kind of written down that I was thinking of was, at the moment we get a lot of our information on the media or the algorithm, and that needs to find us based on a black box of an algorithm somewhere. But now we have the tools to find information ourselves. If we have an interest, if we have something that we want to learn more about, if we want to question our own thinking, if we see something on the street, we can query it in such a quicker way, and it's right there at your fingertips that it shifts it away from, I'm really keen to understand more about that, but I don't have time, or it's too hard to go to my computer, or I don't have the time to do all this stuff. You can literally punch it in, have it there, and it's ready to go. I think, you know, the whole point of this, I guess, is that it's a tool. I don't think we can say that it's making us dumber or it's making us less critical thinking. It's like any tool. You know, we can use any tools wrong. The same as the library, when the people working in libraries and books were saying, oh, you shouldn't use Google. Google's going to make you so much dumber. It's like any tool, you know, and you can use it right, you can use it wrong. Some people will use generative AI tools probably incorrectly, and it may, you know, be less of an impact, but I think people should be open to learn and understand it. You know, there's probably still people typing www.chatgpt.com in your Google search. It just means you don't understand how the tool works and what you can do with the tool. And I think that's where we should have more of a conversation around this, and not feel like we need to explain ourselves as to how these tools can help us.
They're not restricted to the amount of teacher time that they can have. They're not even restricted to the time they would spend with their peers practicing multiplication facts and that kind of thing. They'll be able to move into problems and problem solving ultimately with this machine.
In other words, the computer frees the teacher to spend more time on creative activities that the computer just can't teach. Drama, arts, music. The tool of the future. Before you can say error syntax, it could make the chalk and blackboard obsolete.